You're listening to Deliberate Living, a podcast that inspires, empowers, and encourages listeners to live life more authentically. My name is Holly Priestley, and I'm a full-time nomad and writer who has been living in my 1997 Ford van since January 1st of 2019. I travel the United States with my dog, learning how to live with more authenticity. I explore different ways people choose to ditch the prescribed life we've all been sold and live on their terms, finding freedom and happiness however they choose. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deliberate Living podcast. I am your host, Holly Priestley, and I'm really excited about this week's guest. Her name is Jessy. She lives in a commander with her adorable fluffy cat, Moonchi, and they have been living in their self-renovated, self-mechanicked, amazing vintage camper for 3 years now. And if you're not already following her on Instagram, I hope you get a lot out of this podcast because she's incredible. And if you are following her on Instagram, hopefully you still get a lot out of this podcast because she's incredible. She's very inspiring, got a great artistic eye, and it's just a really good example of following your dream, whether or not you know what the fuck you're doing. So, good morning, Jessy. How are you doing today?
Hey, Holly, thanks for having me. That was quite an intro. I'm flattered.
Well, I'm really happy to have you here and to get to chatting a little bit with you. For the audience who maybe doesn't already know your backstory, would you mind just giving a little bit of how you got to where you are now, what you were doing pre-Commander, and how you got the Commander?
Yeah, so that's always a tough one to answer. Before living on the road, I actually delivered pizzas for 14 years. And then I phased out of that and was doing independent contracting work as a brand ambassador for natural and organic brands. So I've never really fallen in line with society's expectations. And so never married, didn't own a home, never went to college. And I was getting into my 30s and feeling like I want to do something. It was like I had never really subscribed to society standards, but I still hadn't pushed past a few of them that were holding me back from really just stepping into what I wanted and who I wanted to be. And so I broke free of those. And before I decided what I was going to do, I actually was saving money for probably a year. I had an envelope that I labeled The Great Escape, and I just stuffed money in there and didn't know what it was going to be for. And a trip to Colorado, which was the first solo trip I'd ever taken. I was hiking by myself and I was doing whatever I wanted every day. And I was like, I'm so happy in nature. I'm so happy with this freedom. I should make my life look more like this. And then, it was like kind of the snowball effect. I don't know. I just saw my rig. I started looking for something, whether it was going to be a tiny home or like a trailer. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. And then I saw the 1978 Dodge Commander on Craigslist for $1,900. And I was like, that's it. That's my freedom vessel.
I love that. I love the whole, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with this envelope full of cash, but I know I need to break free of the society that I'm already not really a part of. And I'm just going to squirrel away money until I figure out exactly what it's for. I think that can be really beneficial for some people because, I have a lot of friends or even myself where it's like, I don't really know what I want to do next or with this part of my life. So I don't really know how to prepare for it because you don't know what you're doing. But, squirreling away money is never a bad idea.
Right. It's not like that's ever going to backfire.
No. And so when you started looking at rigs, did you test drive any before the Commander or did you even run when you bought it at $1,900?
Yeah, she did. I did go around and look at a few things. Part of my research was just going to dealerships. I went to an RV dealership and I got inside trailers and I got inside pop-ups and I got inside motorhomes, and I just wanted to feel what the different spaces felt like to help narrow down what I was looking for. And I just thought a lot about what my needs were. I had 2 cats at the time. And so my older cat was always pretty crabby and wanted his own space. And so I knew I had to be a certain amount of space to keep him happy. But I didn't want to be over 30 feet because I knew I wanted to go to national parks and I wanted to get on some rougher roads. And so I was looking for shorter than 30 feet with a good amount of like open space. And I just every day I opened up Craigslist, and I was actually getting to the point where I was feeling really burnt out with researching because I was going into this with no background at all. I had never even traveled in a motorhome. I was learning all the new language. I didn't know like what a class C or a class A or a class B. I didn't know anything. And so it was a major learning curve. And I was starting to get really burnt out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to look one more time. And then I'm going to put this down for like at least a week or two because it's really overwhelming. And opened it up, and the listing for Mander had been up for maybe 12 hours. And I contacted the guy, and he was a older gentleman who I think was a bit more old school in his approach to things, because he was like, don't email me, like call me. And so I called him the next morning, and he was like, I've already had 11 phone calls.
Whoa.
Like she was a hot commodity, and he's like, somebody's already on their way. And I was like, no, this is mine. I was like, okay, well, if that falls through for whatever reason, just let me know. I will get in my car. I'll head out to you today. I have the cash. And the people that went before me tried to, I think they just wanted to use PayPal. And he's like, what's this newfangled PayPal? I don't want that. So I was like, so he called me, and I was like, I'm coming with cash. And
he's like, I want that paper money. I don't want this.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
Right. And so, yeah, he was just, I think, looking to get her into a good home, and to somebody that was not going to just let her sit and rot. And I was feeling very inspired and passionate. And I think he picked up on that. And so, yeah, he had it listed for $1,900, and that's what I paid. I didn't even negotiate. I'm like, if it runs for $1,900, I crawled underneath to make sure the frame wasn't rusted out. And I'm like, I have money saved. I can probably overcome like whatever else may be the problem with it. And so I just went for it.
That's incredible. So a few things you said there that I would definitely want to reiterate for anybody listening is like one thing that I did also when I got my van was to go test drive a bunch of different rigs and like actually see how they felt and see how they drove and see how you like felt while you were in them. And you know, if you have pets, you have to take in their needs as well. I think that's really important. Although I do have some friends who have vans who like test drove one van and bought one van, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
But I think especially if you're not quite sure, test driving more is generally a good thing. I also went to some dealerships and was like, there's no way I'm going to buy a brand new anything, but I have access to like put my body in these spaces and see how it feels. So I think that's very awesome. And then like you, I also had no idea. Like I ended up in a Ford E350, and I didn't know what made it a 350 or a 250 or a 150. I didn't know what made them different. I didn't know like so much, and I still don't, but I know so much more now than I did 3 years ago when I was test driving, right? And I think that process of learning and like gaining all that knowledge about what a class A, B, C is, and like how you even pronounce chassis, because online it's spelled weird. It's got an extra S in there.
That's true. Chassis.
Yeah, but that's not how you pronounce it. But that learning process is really important, but it's also exhausting. So did that process from like starting to test drive and like go to dealerships to getting Mander, was that like a couple of weeks, or was that a couple of months, or how long did that take you?
It's all kind of a blur now, but I can say that from me making the decision that I wanted a motorhome to when I was actually on the road was probably, excuse me, at least 2 years.
Okay.
So there was some time saving up money. And then once I actually got a nest egg, I didn't spend a ton of time looking. I would say maybe a few months. I really can't remember. But then there was like a year and 3 months of renovation and preparing to live on the road. And so I think it's safe to say it was at least 2 years before I was actually on the road.
Yeah. And during that 2-year period, was there any part of you that was like, fuck, what have I done?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I very distinctly remember, because Mander had a fair amount of water damage, which is notorious with all RVs and especially one from 78. And so there was, I mean, I knew that there was some water damage, but then once I actually explored it, it was much more than I thought. And so I ended up rebuilding the ceiling in the back and one of the walls. And then I was just doing lots of other renovations. And I had spent so much time investing in the living part of my rig. And I hadn't spent much time on the mechanical part. And it was kind of nearing the end. And I was taking a bath, and I just all of a sudden had this thought in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, what if I get on the road and my engine explodes within like the first week? And I like had a panic attack. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm putting all of my eggs in this one basket and I have no idea if this is right. I only think that it's right. It only feels right, but maybe it's not. And it just kind of spiraled for a moment.
Yeah.
And then I had to just tell myself, okay, if that happens, you're not like striking a match and like throwing it behind me and like unable to come back to my life, you know, like I could easily come back and get an apartment and get a job and just, you know, do what I was doing before. I wasn't actually doing anything that I couldn't come back from, but it does feel quite terrifying, and it's very overwhelming. I mean, from just like the research process to then the building process, then to the getting on the road. It's a never ending learning curve. It just doesn't let up. And so it is absolutely overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. Even 3 years later, it doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
always got some kind of project, you know, especially with
Yeah.
older engines. I imagine that
Mm-hmm.
he needs or she needs regular maintenance, and potentially
Mm-hmm.
like if she needs a new part or something, are those hard to come by with something that was built in the 70s?
No, I've actually accidentally, I think, made a really good purchase. I didn't know either about like what exactly my engine or my transmission or anything was, but basically it's a Dodge 440 and a Torque Flight 727, which are what went in muscle cars of the 70s. So it's just like actually it's kind of like a race car engine, you know, like it's, but I go very, very slow. I'm not burning rubber, that's for sure. But all that to say that parts are readily available. There are lots of Mopar enthusiasts. Like these aren't parts that I've struggled to find. They're only like the only time that I've ever encountered anything that's a little bit difficult is when something has been modified to be for an RV, which was just like the brackets on my radiator, you know, or just silly little things like that. But overall, all my engines have been standard to any 70s big block engine, really.
That's awesome. That's incredible. That's really fortunate.
Yeah, yeah. It's made the mechanical endeavor and maintenance part of this much more manageable financially. Because if I'm doing most of the work myself, and then my parts are really cheap, and so it's, I think otherwise could have broke the bank and made it a whole different sort of situation for me.
Yeah. And as far as like not being a mechanic and not knowing anything about cars to going to like working
Mhm.
on your home, you know, mechanically, how has
Mhm.
that process been for you? Have you like, how do you learn how to fix your engine?
Well, I guess I wouldn't say that I knew nothing about vehicles. I have always been very curious. I did work at Jiffy Lube for a year when I was 18, 19. And so um, I knew all of the basics, like, you know, all of the under the hood stuff. And then I hung out with a bunch of dudes that were really enthusiastic about vehicles. And so I have not been a stranger to that place, but I did not do any of like the depth of the stuff that I'm doing now. So
Yeah.
I always like to say that just being curious and being willing to pop your hood, or in my case, pull off the doghouse and look and poke at things and ask questions, and um, that's all that it really takes. And then I've been fortunate enough to have a couple friends that they're either professional mechanics or have just, been working on their own vehicles their whole lives. And they help guide me sometimes, especially if I'm like freaking out with some new thing that happened. And there's like, calm down, take it step by step, look at this. If it's not that, look at this. And so I have had some gurus, but overall, I think it's just about being open to the possibility of being capable of doing it yourself. I mean, people just get really intimidated and they're like, I don't know anything about that. I can't do it. Yeah, and if you have that mindset, then you're right, you can. But if you're like, oh, maybe I can, let me look at this, like that really is all kind of you need to start. And then, I mean, if you don't have any mechanical savvy friends, there's YouTube, there's a million, there's forums, there's so many ways to learn. And then I actually don't spend a lot of time on YouTube. I am silly in the sense that I like to learn through doing. So I make a lot of mistakes, but I prefer it that way. I like to just dive in and then go, oh, whoops, I took that part off and I didn't need to.
Yeah. I think that's really cool and a very good analogy for life. Like if you're anything at all, if you want to learn something or like try something new or branch into a new career or a new lifestyle, just be open to the fact that you don't know and be open to wanting to learn something else. And there's some things in life that we just don't want to learn, and that's fine.
Yeah.
You have to accept that about yourself as well.
Yeah. For me, that's technology. Like when it comes to like anything web designy or if it's too technical, I'm like, this is like another language that I don't want to learn. But but I've always been really interested in doing things with my hands. Like I feel like I'm a DIY person, like across the board. And so that applies to mechanical stuff as well, because I'm using that same sort of part of my brain that I enjoy.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Some people would be absolutely terrified to pop a hood or take off a doghouse. And in my van, I kind of have to do both depending on which part of the engine I need to get to. And some people would look at that and be like, nope, I'm taking it straight to a mechanic. Like I know my limitations and that is one of them. But web design, like hand it over. I will figure out how to code. I will make it pretty. If it breaks, I will figure out how to fix it. And it's not like one is better than the other. It just, it's your personality.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I think learning the mechanic thing has been super important because this is my house. I can't just give my house to the mechanic and then I am booted out. And not only am I paying for a mechanic, but I'm paying for a hotel with a pet deposit and my cat's stressed out. And then I'm stressed out because my cat's stressed out. And it just makes more sense for me to be capable of doing those kind of things, because then I not only am saving money, but I'm not getting stuck in situations where I have lost control of things and I am feeling like I'm up shit creek without a paddle,
Well, and you can't just like take your vehicle into any old mechanic. Like you need to take it to a place that has space, literal space, house your rig, and that's not as common to find.
Yeah, and then when you're traveling to new places all the time, you don't know who's trustworthy or reliable, and it's just not practical for me anyway.
No. And I would like to talk a little bit about your lifestyle on the road anyway, because I think it is different from how a lot of people believe like living on the road to be. You're traveling all the time, you're gallivanting on all these back roads, you're going to see new places every day, you're just not holding still because you got that freedom of having your house on wheels. And you do it the complete opposite. You max out those 14-day stays, and driving is really anxiety inducing and very stressful. And so you're kind of doing the road life different than, hashtag van life, hashtag blessed, always an
Yeah. Well, that has actually always been very curious to me, because for me, stepping out of kind of society standards, which is very much hustle mentality, like have your schedule packed all the time, social engagements, like you're very much pushed to be busy, and that's never worked for me. And so I was really looking forward to getting into this lifestyle where I could slow down even more than I was already trying to slow down. And so I've always been curious about the fact that a lot of people seem to take that conventional lifestyle mentality into this lifestyle. And I'm like, I feel like you're missing out on one of the really big gifts of this lifestyle, which is where you don't have to feel like you're on vacation, where you're like, I need to cram all the sites in within this amount of time, and then I got to move on to the next one. Because for me, that's always what kind of sucked about vacations. I'm like, oh, it's over, we didn't get to see that. Or I felt like the whole entire time I was abiding by an itinerary or something. And so it really feels freeing to me to be able to do this and to remove all that and to absorb these places in a way that I wasn't capable of before, and get to dig a little deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think that, I mean, when I first moved into the van 2 years ago, I did a lot more traveling. My lifestyle kind of required it. And then also I was, freedom drunk. I have all of this time and space and I can go anywhere I want. So I'm going to. And the last year, I've been forced to slow down for a few reasons, one of them being COVID, one of them being a new relationship and all of these other things. And now I'm like, oh, I have to drive. I just want to stay here.
I know.
Enjoy where I'm at. I've got perfect hammock trees. I never have perfect hammock trees, like whatever it is about the space that I'm in, and I'm completely in love with it in the moment. But I'll find myself getting restless after a couple of weeks. Like, okay, now I want to see something new. I've seen everything. I've done all the trails. Something new.
Yeah, I definitely feel like, when your time has run out in a place where you're just like, okay, I feel ready to move on. But that feels like it's coming from a different place than the hustle mentality, which I feel like that's, I don't know, I honor that more than I honor the like needing to check things off the list.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's important. I'm a recovering hustle and grind associate for sure. I was pre-van life, can always work, can always do something new, always being productive. I have a hard time like relaxing. I feel like even reading a book is like, oh, that's too indulgent. I could be doing anything else right now that could be more productive. But I am enjoying like the slowing down now. And part of that is, living in a space where your living expenses are so low that you don't necessarily have to work 40 hours a week just to pay to stay alive. So do you want to talk a little bit about like how you sustain life on the road and like maybe what your expenses are, how you meet them, and the logistics of life in a Mander?
Yeah. So I definitely keep expenses down by trying not to drive too much, because I only get 6 to 7 miles to the gallon. So if I decided to go at the speed that a lot of people go, I'd be broke in no time. But I did set out on the road with a little bit of nest egg because I knew I didn't know how I was going to make money. And so I lived off of that for a while. And so I did odd jobs and I tried out different ideas for a while. And then eventually I created an e-guide that is called Van Life, Your Guide to Becoming a Modern Nomad. And I sell that online. I also offer one-on-one coaching for people that are looking to get into this lifestyle or are like just starting. And there's usually that chunk of time when you're just starting and you're really struggling, and not everybody has a support system. And so I do offer that as well. And I was selling bumper stickers for a while. I have a different sort of relationship with money, I think, than some, where I don't know, I've always been really frugal, and I don't have like a very high budget in the first place. I got on the road without debt, so I was already set up for that to be a little bit easier for me. And I think delivering pizzas for 14 years, like, I guess, got me very comfortable with not having a consistent income. And so my money is very inconsistent. Like sometimes I'll make a chunk of money, like if I do maybe a sponsored post on Instagram, which is very few and far between, but I can take that chunk of money and make it last a really long time. So I guess a short answer to your question is I make money here and there and I piece it together and I somehow make it work.
Yeah. I've recently started having to say that. I have friends who, were my friends pre-van life. And so I've always been an entrepreneur, not always, but for a long time now, I have been an entrepreneur. And so I have a lot of other friends who are entrepreneurs. And so when we get together, we talk about business, we talk about money, we talk about all these things. And I love being able to talk about those things that are more like taboo. But so some of them have been asking me lately, like, how are you making this work? Like, we know that you're not doing XYZ things that you were doing at first to like make money. We don't know what the fuck you're doing now. Like, how are you making it? And I'm like, honestly, I'm not really sure either. I'm just
yes, exactly.
No, I'm piecing it together and it's working.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I have a Patreon as well. I think that's like my only source of any sort of stable income, but even that's a little bit unstable in the sense that people can come and go. But I put regular vlogs on Patreon, and that's something I've been a little bit more focused on the last year, and so I've got that to grow a little bit more. But yeah, it's I think very hard for a lot of people to understand this relationship with money or work, even for that matter. When you live this lifestyle, there's just, unless you can have like a regular 9 to 5 remote job, which some people can absolutely do, you're gonna be just figuring out as you go.
Yeah, I think that should give, I think some people would get a lot of anxiety from that, but I feel like there's a set of people who would be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, it's very liberating and it gives them a lot of like sense, like peace of mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's always jobs to be had. I mean, I know a lot of people like go work on pot farms seasonally, or like, if you're very frugal and you pay attention to your finances, you can, and this lifestyle is so affordable, you can really make ends meet pretty easily.
Yeah. I know that you somewhat recently got into a relationship. Prior to that, you were traveling primarily solo, correct?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences between like traveling as a solo independent woman who don't need no man to like suddenly having another rig and another human around, and any of the pros and cons, challenges, or blessings that has brought into your life?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I think, it was almost a solid 3 years of being on my own. And, I think I caravan with a couple girlfriends here and there, but I never had a partner that I did date one person. That was pretty short lived. But this has been basically, it's just made my life so much easier. To have another person, not only to help plan a little, although he claims he just follows me around and I make all the plans, which is, I do like to have more control in that arena, but at least bounce ideas off of and be like, what do you think we should do? But he has, like, we couldn't be more different in the rigs that we drive. He got a brand new Mercedes Sprinter, and he's got like a lift, and so his rig is obviously very reliable and a lot more capable. And so I have a lot more relief when I'm driving, just knowing that I have a backup person behind me with a house that, if like, that was always one of my bigger stressors. I was like, okay, what if my rig breaks down and I can't fix it? I'm going to have to get towed. And then what do? I put my cat in her carrier and like get a litter box, and like how do I facilitate the transportation? And then like I gotta find, it's so less stressful thinking like, if that scenario happened, my boyfriend's behind me with a second home and he loves my cat, and we absolutely could just move in there and it would save a ton of stress and expenses. And also for adventuring, like when we want to go hiking or exploring, we take his vehicle, and then mine just stays parked and saves our camp spot. And, we run errands in his vehicles, and there's just like so many things that are easier with him.
Yeah.
And this is actually the first relationship I think that I've ever been in my entire adult life that has been easy as well. Like, it's insane the amount of time that we spend together. I've never spent this much time with a single other person, I think, other than like my mom, maybe.
Yeah.
and,
as an adult.
and I'm like, yeah. And I'm just like, how is it that we're still like getting along so well? I don't know. Things are just much easier with him. So I feel very lucky. As far as any sort of challenges, finding a spot big enough for two. Yeah, I mean, I think we encountered maybe a little bit more relationship hurdles sooner than most people, just because it's like, when you're dating on the road, it's full on. There's, I mean, yeah, you're just going from 0 to 100 in like a month.
Yeah.
And so, but we were able to move past that. And so, yeah, I don't know. Now it's pretty easy. I'm liking it. I mean, I think I did it long enough by myself that I've earned a little easy.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I've had a very similar experience, and so it's nice to talk to someone else who has kind of gone through the same thing. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of the same benefits. My van stays here. We take his to run errands. His is slightly more capable.
Yeah.
Our vans are really similar in a lot of ways. They're not as different as a Mander and a Sprinter, but
right.
There are a lot of benefits. Or like when we do have to go to the mechanic, we'll take both of our vans to the same mechanic, and then his will go in first. We'll hang out in mine, and then mine will go in and we'll hang out in his. So we don't have to do any of this like Airbnb stuff. And but there are some challenges because two humans coming together is always a challenge, but it's also easy. And I don't know, it's interesting and it's a lot of fun, and I'm glad that you're also having that experience.
Yeah, I think actually one of the biggest challenges that I can now think about is maybe alone time.
Yeah.
Like you live next door to your boyfriend. I mean, when I say next door, I mean like you can throw a stick and hit their house. And so it's we've had to implement some interesting tactics that have worked really well for us. Like we both have our alone time in the morning. We sleep together, but then we wake up and he goes to his house, and then we have a couple hours in the morning to ourselves, and we both kind of feel like morning time is our sacred time, and we both are working and just needing that slower time to be more inward and quiet. And then we've also implemented maintenance nights. So in order to have to keep our relationship in good working order, every maybe once or twice a week, we have a maintenance night where he goes and sleeps in his rig, and we just have the evenings to ourselves. And so I feel like that helps give us that alone time before we're really needing it and we're annoyed with each other and fighting over something stupid, just because we haven't had any time to ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's really important also. My honey and I kind of we don't necessarily have the same routine. I'm a morning person and he's an evening person. And I'm an introvert and he's an extrovert. So we definitely have some differences there, and we're figuring out how to work through them. And our jobs are totally different. I mean, he works seasonally in the summer times as a wildland firefighter. So for 6 months out of the year, we're around each other 24/7. And then for 6 months out of the year, it's kind of a normal relationship where I see him maybe once or a couple of times a week, maybe, if he's not shipped out somewhere fighting a fire. But it is a weird thing, and I think that you guys are figuring out ways to make it work for you, and that's what anyone can hope to do. Seems like you're a proponent of the 2 vehicles for 2 people.
Yeah it works well for us, especially since Mander is so big. We have our living sort of situation in here where we eat all our meals in here for the most part, except a bigger kitchen. And his is great for one person or for adventuring, but I don't know how people do two people in a van. I mean, it's just two people can't even be standing at the same time. It's very difficult to navigate. And I imagine that I would get frustrated and annoyed and snippy very easily if I had to live in that small space with a person.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. What do you think are some of the biggest like pros and cons of the lifestyle as a whole? I mean, we've touched on a few of them, the lower cost of living, more like freedom to get to know yourself, and then the cons are it's harder to find a mechanic, and if you have to get a mechanic, then you're out of house and all of that. Can you think of any additional major pros and cons of being on the road for you?
Yeah, I would say probably my biggest con, and I knew it going into it. I knew that part of this experience for me was a deliberate attempt at trying to release control and trying to surrender in a sense, and trying to just be more trusting in myself and the universe and how things will conspire in my favor. And I'm definitely a more anxious person. And so that's a regular struggle for me between having breakdowns where I kind of have a learned experience now that when I get behind the wheel, I'm like, anything can happen. And so there's like a lot of, I developed driving anxiety. Like I never had that before. And just the constant needing to plan and figure out like where you're going and trying to figure out a lot of things that maybe aren't even within your control. Like, well, what's the road going to be like? Am I going to be able to get in? Is there going to be spots available? Who's parked there? Just like so many things that you have to remind yourself, like, okay, I can only know so much, and then I have to surrender and I have to just go and try to not be an anxious mess about it. Right. And so I don't even know if I would say that that's a con, because it really is just an offering for me to continue to work on that part of myself, which was, a big, it was already a thing that I was choosing to do and knew that it was part of this lifestyle. So yeah, I don't know. I guess like the cons are just more like minor inconveniences and how everything's just hard. But yeah, I mean, even in the hard stuff, there is benefits of that. I actually just wrote a blog post about the unexpected gifts of being a nomad, and I touched on the fact that like you have to be very mindful of for me, my propane and my water and my food and all of these things, because when you run out of those things, that means you have to leave camp, you have to move your whole house into town, you have to find places to do those things. And it's all really inconvenient, but it does allow you to be in the mindset of gratitude and mindfulness and more often if you choose to view it that way. Otherwise it could just be annoying and tiring.
Yeah.
Which it is that too sometimes, to be honest. I'm not that great about being like, oh, this is just a beautiful moment for me to be grateful for finding this dumpster.
Yeah, no, fully agree. I mean, when I have to go do chore days, I'm just like, at the beginning of it, I'm like, all right, chore day. I love having fresh water, and I love throwing my trash away, and I love having, restocked produce. And then by the end of the day, I'm just like, I need a nap.
Yeah. I mean, it is quite exhausting. Yeah, because you also like are adding in the fact that you're in new towns all the time. You don't know where these things are. You don't know what washer is going to stop working halfway through. You don't know like what grocery store stocks the kind of stuff that you like to eat. I mean, there's just so much decision making, and it is tiring. Even with the best mentality, it's tiring.
Yeah. And like, if you're a proponent of hustle culture, I mean, they talk about decision fatigue all the time, right? So like set up your day so that you have to make less decisions so that you can be more productive with the parts of your day that you do have to make decisions on, right? Like Steve Jobs, wear the exact same clothes every day. Like everybody talks about decision fatigue, but when you're living in a van, everything is a decision.
Yeah.
Everything, like every part of your life is going to be some kind of decision. And like one thing that I've always said about living in the van is that it eliminates a lot of the complicated things about life, right? Like you just don't
Mhm.
have the complications that we had before. You don't have to find a place to rent with that allows your dog that you can afford. You don't have to worry about like cleaning out your gutters or like blowing out your sprinklers, or like there's just so many complications that you just don't have anymore. But at the same time, it complicates the simple things. Like you can't just plug in
Mhm.
and have endless power. You can't just have like your water running like the whole time you're washing dishes or doing like your teeth brushing. Like you can't just have a shower anytime you want. Like it
Mhm.
eliminates a lot of the complicated, but it complicates a lot of the simple. And so
Yeah.
everything is an exhausting decision you have to make.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel this lifestyle is way more difficult than any way that I was living before. It challenges me way more. But yeah, the pros of that is that you get a lot of growth and you get a lot of practice um, figuring out what's really important to you and what matters to you. And yeah, to touch on the pros of the lifestyle is for me being able to slow way down. Like people, I've heard more than once, people are like, you were a sloth in your former life. Like have always been drawn to just like chilling and having time to just breathe and to just like look at stuff and to feel more grounded. Or and I don't know if this is just like a reaction to me feeling more like I'm an anxious person, and so I'm always searching for things to help me feel calm and help me feel chilled out.
Yeah.
And so this lifestyle does allow me, like when it's not drive days or errand days or those moments, I do get that where I get to just go to a quiet spot and watch bugs and be in nature and take a nap and read a book. And there's a lot of other stuff in between that, but I get more of those moments than ever before. And I think the true, like, unexpected gift of this lifestyle is I've met more people now than ever before in my entire life that are like me. Like I've always felt like an odd duck. I never had any friends that were like me, honestly. Like we had some similarities, but I had a lot of friends that were extroverts or like into the party scene or more corporate, or maybe some creative people here and there. But I didn't ever really feel like I had a group of people that I felt connected to. And it's because they all live on the road, and I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that as well. Like I had a recent episode about building community on the road and how you can meet more people who are like you just by the fact that they're living a deliberately alternative lifestyle that is
Yeah.
similar to or the exact same one that you're living. And so you automatically have a lot more in common. And like your
Hmm.
values are probably similar in that way. And then
Yeah.
it just, I don't know, gives you that sense of I don't think security is the right word, but just camaraderie, like knowing there's other people out there doing what you're doing. And,
Hmm.
if you have a question about the lifestyle or you have like a new problem coming up, there's people you can ask, or like people who will commiserate with you or like celebrate with you when you figure out something like very specific that your stationary friends just won't understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody wants connection. And when you can find it in a deeper way, that always feels great, and it's just, I think a particular type of person is drawn to this lifestyle. And we all maybe were drawn to it initially for different reasons. But once you get in this lifestyle, like you were saying, there's a certain experience that you have that bonds you with other people that are, whether they're living on the road for the exact same reasons or not, like you have an icebreaker. And I do think a lot of like values seem to line up more. So like we obviously all value nature and travel. I mean, unless you live in a van in the city, in which case that's maybe a little bit different. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are attempting to like slow down a bit and be in nature and to get their priorities sorted and have a more deliberate life.
Absolutely. What do you think are your future plans for Mander? Do you have any future plans? Or are you just doing day by day and this is how it's going? Or
That's definitely something that this lifestyle has taught me, is that plans are for fools. I mean, driving an old rig that has a mind of her own and just the road being unpredictable, I try not to make too many plans. I do, of course, fantasize or have a general direction or idea, but it's very loose. I've always said, like, I'm going to do this for as long as it feels good, and when it stops feeling good, then that's when I know that I'll be looking for something else. And right now it's still feeling good, and so no plans to get off the road. And there are still some states that I'd like to check out, so I don't feel like my time on the road is nearing an end, or especially with the speed that I travel. I probably got to do another 3 years before I see all the states that I want to see. But I think right now I have maybe some more plans or goals for maybe the more like business end of this lifestyle. Like, I'd like to get the money aspect a little bit more comfortable. As much as I hate to admit it, having a little bit of money does alleviate stress. And so I have more goals and just trying to focus on Patreon more and trying to up my game and just like be more consistent with my blog posts and stuff like that. But those are all very like daily sort of efforts, not any broad stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I appreciate that. I think that that's, I mean, as much as you try to make plans, like, I'm pretty sure I know where I'm going to be this summer, but like, I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like, I know that I have this interview with you now, but the rest of the day is kind of like, I should do these things, but we'll kind of figure it out. So I think that living on the road kind of helps you do that and have more of that like mental flexibility that you need to tackle things as they come, especially if you're
it's
an anxious person who really likes to be in control of things.
Right.
Not that I don't that at all.
Yeah, it's wild. Before I lived on the road, I definitely was more like, plans, tell me what time, let's figure it out, let's schedule it. And then this lifestyle just beat me into submission. And now I actually get more anxious when somebody's like, where are you going to be in a month? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen between now and a month. I could find like the most amazing boondocking spot ever and not want to leave. And then that sets back any sort of plan to be anywhere. And so it really does program you more to live more in the moment and be more present with the now, because you know we can make plans for the future, but really anything can happen, and then it just feels like a bunch of wasted energy.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk with you about that for like hours.
Yeah, I think we might be I think we might be similarly wired in that way.
I think so. I definitely think so. What advice would you give younger you of maybe 5 years ago, or you know, a friend of yours who happens to be, you know, thinking about like, I don't fit in with society's version of life, but I don't know what else to do. What advice would you give to that person?
That's a good question, because I do think about sometimes how I wish I would have pulled the trigger sooner. Like, I spent, I think, more years than I needed to coasting. But then I think, but is that true? Because really, like, aren't we all just where we're supposed to be at the time we're supposed to be there? And maybe that's how much time I needed to get to where I am. And but so it's hard to think about what advice I would give myself, because I would want to say like, enough, like, that's enough, like, wake up, you're almost awake, wake up all the way. But I think the generic thing that I always say to myself and to everyone is that you are so much more capable than you know. And people are always like, oh, you're so fearless and you're so brave. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm afraid all the time. Like, the exercise is to be afraid and know it's a feeling just like any other feeling, and it will pass. And so you have to keep practicing pushing past that little barrier. And the more that you do that, the easier that gets, because you remember, you're like, oh, I feel really afraid right now, but I know that's going to go away. I just have to take that first step to pass this wall, and then and then it'll start subsiding. And so I don't know, maybe some of that is what I'd tell myself or somebody else. That's it pisses me off to think that fear has such a hold on people.
Yeah.
And it's so controlling, and it's so it's so silly when you think about the fact that it's just a feeling and it rules people's lives.
Yes.
And that's just not, I just don't think that should be the case. And so I don't know. I still am afraid of things all the time. It's just a practice of getting familiar with that feeling and acquainted with it, and letting it do its thing and move on.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. I don't think we should follow that up with anything. I think that is a perfect lesson to people with. I think that's a really good thing to just chew on and like let yourself marinate in for probably the rest of your life. Every time you feel fear, just come back to Jessy telling you that it's just a feeling. You can get past it.
Don't let little old fear tell you what to do.
No, absolutely not. Jessy, where could people come find you on the interwebs if they want to follow along more with your story?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I am a.girl.and.her.commander, and there's a period between every word. And my blog is a.girl.and.her.commander.com, and that's also where you could purchase my guide or my coaching sessions. And then Patreon. What am I always forgetting about Patreon? I'm a bad businesswoman. Patreon is linked.
Yeah. I'll link to all of them in the show notes as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jessy, for being a part of the show today. Seriously, I could talk to you for hours. So
yeah, thanks, Holly. Hopefully,
let's make that happen.
Yes. Yes. I think that needs to be in our future.
Yep. Agreed. And thank you all for participating in this week's episode of Deliberate Living. If you got anything out of this episode at all, please give it a thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever it is on the platform that you are consuming it on. That helps us get seen. That helps the algorithms show the show to other people who need this kind of information and this kind of morale boost and capability giver. And this will be starting off the second year of the Deliberate Living show. So I hope y'all are subscribed and continue to tune in. And if you want to help offset some of the costs that go into creating the show, I have a PayPal and a Venmo set up that are linked in the show notes as well. And I hope you tune in next week for another awesome episode. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Holly. Bye.
We've reached the end of this episode of Deliberate Living. You can find the show notes and everything we referenced over on my website, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on YouTube, or sign up for email updates every time something new is published. I'll see you next time on Deliberate Living, and until then, keep your life on the DL too.